Welcome to The Bigger Game, where we talk about what really matters in living with purpose. I'm your host, Abiza Rashid. Let's dive into bold conversation, life experiences, and go from stuck to unstoppable. Welcome to this edition of The Bigger Game. We're here today with Paul Tramo from Sentinel Process Systems, President, CEO. Key supplier of fluid control products to the pharmaceutical industry. Sounds fascinating, Paul. How are you?
I'm well, Beezer. How are you?
Hey, excellent. Good to see you. Good to be on the show again. It's been a long time since we met, so at least a month at least, huh? So it's good to see you again. Um, you're on the podcast, The Bigger Game. Tell us what the bigger game means to you.
Well, I guess it really has a lot to do with how you leave, what you leave behind. I guess is really the bigger game, right? Your family, your legacy, the impact you have on others. I think is really the bigger game. So let me back up. Maybe when I say what you leave behind is a little too morose. I'm not talking about leave behind when you're dead necessarily, but when you leave behind when you're done with somebody, basically, or not done with them, but when you have an interaction with somebody.
Yeah. Leave them better than you found them.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Yes, I think that's the bigger game at the end of the day. I mean, obviously, it's about financial security and family and God and things like that. But I try to live that way in terms of what I can do to help other people.
So how has that manifested itself at Sentinel or other places in your life?
I would say we invest a lot in development. So, we're not a huge company. We're currently 32 people, but it's still pretty big to really give everybody personal attention and things like that. So I would answer that by saying that we invest a lot in our people. We do a lot of coaching. We do a lot of professional development. Trying to stay, here we are in an industrial, where we'd be classified sort of as we're an industrial company, but we're trying to embrace AI as much as possible. And we've gone through trainings with AI. We brought in consultants to help us, figure out how we can utilize AI, and everybody's involved from the shop floor all the way up to me learning about this stuff. Even though they may never use it, potentially, who knows? Well, the reason I did it from that way is because they will use it someday. They almost have to, the way things are going. So again, to answer more succinctly, it's kind of what I do here at the company for that is I try to invest in the people, basically, and try to make it a really great place to work. And we invest a lot in our culture. We're very, very deliberate about our culture and maintaining it and strengthening it. So that's a big part of what we do.
So give us some more detail about that. I think, a lot of us, we struggle with that aspect. It's so intangible sometimes, right? The whole cultural conversation.
Absolutely. I remember, so I went down this path now probably eight or 9 years ago, because I struggled with what is our culture, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And I owe a lot of our success in terms of culture, which frankly I believe is our success as a company, to an author named David Friedman, who wrote a book called Culture by Design. And really, really very simple system that he developed. And he based it off of the Ritz-Carlton's philosophy, where at every change of shift at a Ritz-Carlton, not sure it still happens under the Marriott umbrella, but when it was Ritz-Carlton, at every shift change, they would review their top sort of core values, they may call it. I don't know what they called it back then, but they would really talk about what it means to be, a Ritz employee and how we treat customers and so on and so forth. And he modeled this in his own business as an insurance broker. Again, a commoditized business, where you can get insurance from all kinds of people. And it was so game changing for him. He actually sold his insurance business and started a company called Culture Wise. So I found David, I heard him speak. He's a big Vistage speaker and things like that. I heard him speak, and he it really resonated with me. And it was really about what I just said about being very deliberate about it and trying to unravel it, identify it, and then really just constantly focus on it and making sure everybody understands. We've all heard probably that, if you don't have a culture, the loudest person in the business or the company or the organization is the culture. And that can be deadly unless it's you or me, the, the founder or the visionary, I guess. So that's how it started. And like I said, it was a very, very simple process when we did it. The homework was, what does your best employee do that you love and you want to do everybody do more of, and what's your most challenging employee do that drives you crazy? What do you want people to do less of? And we started there, and leadership team got together, and we just started throwing things on a whiteboard of what we do really well, what people say about us, why they interact with us, and we started just developing these what are known as fundamentals. So we got down to 31, and we do one a week. So for example,
Wait, I'm sorry, 31 what? 31.
31 fundamentals.
Okay. All right.
They're on our website. They're called the SPS Way. And for example, this week's fundamental is deliver an effortless experience. And that goes for coworkers as well as customers. So we really talk about how we can be better at making it effortlessly to either work here or buy from us. What can we do to make it easier and make it less stressful? And then that builds into several other fundamentals. So it's an ongoing and sort of circular thing. One of those things is another fundamental that we have that we say, be fanatic about response time. So, and by the way, these are behaviors. They're not just these sort of puffy words. There's words to go after that really detail what that means to us and what the expectation is of our team members. So what I started to say was, so this week happens to be, deliver an effortless experience. And what we do on Monday morning, everybody in the company gets an email written by one of our team members about what this fundamental means to them. And in every meeting of 3 or more people, for the first 5 to 7 minutes, we talk about this week's fundamental. How can we do it better? How do we do it now well? What have we heard from customers about this fundamental? All these other things, and just kind of constantly focus on how important these things are. And we go through 31, and on week 32, we go back to number 1, and we just keep going around and around. So we started this back in 2019. So this will be our 7th year of this process, and everybody here and all of our employees know our fundamentals, and not only by documenting it and doing this sort of process, it leads to coaching opportunities. It leads to disciplinary opportunities. In other words, we say, hey, you agreed when you started working here, you're going to abide by our 31 behaviors that we expect you to do. And if you're not living up to number 2 or 6 or 8, let's talk about that, So it's been a really, really big help for us, and we're really, really dedicated to it. So it's really a driver for us.
What was the road to actually get those implemented and getting buy-in from your management team and your employees? Like, you started it from scratch, right? There was no such thing until you created the 31 fundamentals. Change is always an interesting conversation to be had, right? So tell us about the roadmap of how that unfolded. Did people just jump in and get all bored? Did you have to how was that journey?
Well, it was. I don't even think or recall it being that heavy a lift. It just got to have to be kind of rote, where we were just doing it all the time. So, back in the first year, I wrote every single email that went out, and then we rolled it out next to the management team. So the management team would take 3 or 5 each, and they would write those emails. And then now everybody in the company takes one. So we'll put it up when it comes time and everybody picks two or three that they'll do, or now I guess it's actually one. It used to be two or three when we had that fewer people, but picks one and they write an email about it, and then it goes out. But getting back to your question directly, it was something that as the leader and the leadership team, we made sure it was clear. This is very important, and this is the way we operate, and this is the expectations that we live by. Um, and it was adopted because, again, that was our culture. It was our culture. We just now were able to articulate it and delineate it. So it just enhanced our ability to hire for culture, which is so important.
You didn't really change it. You put words to it and gave definition to something that already existed. Did you?
Very much so. So I will say some of them are a little aspirational. Some of them are more difficult than others are to live every day. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I tell people some of them are aspirational. We want to be this. We're striving to be this or behave this way. It's important to identify these as behaviors, because the challenge you have when many companies have core values, and core values very often are ambiguous. The customer's always right, or customer's number one, or these kind of things that means something to you totally different than it means to me. So we tried to, again with David's help, refine it down to the behaviors that roll into that. And it's funny, and I know you're a student of EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. That was a rub early on, because they're like, you can't have those. You can only have 5 to 7 core values. That's it. You got to make it real. And we're like, well, wait a minute, this is so critical to us. So we sort of reversed engineered our core values. We said, well, what are our core values? And then we matched the fundamentals. Like, well, holy smokes, our core values. Relentless passion is one of our core values. There's like 6 or 8 fundamentals. Go right to that. So these emails, now getting back to those emails, part of what we ask our people to do is to tie a core value to this week's fundamental. So we have 5 core values, 31 fundamentals. They'll pick the best one that matches the core value. Team above self, relentless passion. Oh geez, no, I've just blanked out. I always do this. Anyway, I can get back to that. It'll come to me.
Yeah. But I think we get the point of this. Yeah. So you had a culture that was already kind of there, because that's kind of what you espouse as the leader of the organization. And this process that you just described allowed you to put words to it. And over time, you've rolled it out, not just from yourself to your management team, but now across the entire company, and given ownership to everybody, because everybody writes one. So now they're all part of the process. So the culture is like owned by all 30 some odd employees now at this point.
Oh yeah.
I think,
and we've done games with it. We've done, so as David's company has evolved, they created an app. So the app has, they can give kudos to each other. They can call people out, and they get points to that. So we keep track of that, and we do cash bonuses, typically quarterly, for the highest point person. So yeah, we're, like I said, it's a very big part of what we do. Every meeting starts this way. It's something that we take very, very seriously, and I believe it is. You probably have heard the I think it was Peter Drucker that said that culture eats strategy for lunch. It's so critical, and I've come to learn so much about its value, and really understanding what you have and what makes you special, and what you got to work to correct and fix. It really does make a big difference.
Yeah, I want to come back to that point. And one thing I wanted to ask you while you were going this path, this current topic was yourself, right? As someone who led the charge on this and now has got 30 some odd people on board and rushing forward. Do you find yourself having to stay ahead of them every step of the way as the leader of the organization? And what has that experience like been for you?
No, I don't try to stay ahead of them. I'm hoping they get ahead of me, to be honest with you. Um, my role is to stay ahead of our customers and what they need, or what can make their jobs easier. And I don't mean to be trite, but that's kind of what I'm focused on, is looking for new service offerings and new technologies we can bring to our customers. But I'm very focused on building out the teams and building out our people. So this thing goes on and on and on.
So it's about surrounding yourself with people better than you.
That
It's part
is
of your
the idea.
culture.
Yes, that is the idea, that was another thing that we did when we get down to personal, professional development. We focused a lot on that. So we use several different assessment tools, primarily for hiring, but also for cultural fit and for to improve our communication with each other. And again, the whole thing is, and I don't want to quote all these famous people, but Aristotle said to know thyself is rule number one. I think is what his quote was, or something like that. But basically, for you to understand who you are, how you communicate, how you find reward in life, whether it's personal, whether it's acclamation from others, or it's money, or whatever it is, to understand all those things, and more importantly, for other people to understand their coworkers, so they can communicate at a level that works best. Understanding what somebody's needs is. For example, and again, you're probably familiar with Colby, which is one of the assessments that EOS stresses, or uses, or whatever. The That's really largely about how you digest and act on information. You know, and it's really telling, and it's been really helpful to understand how this guy needs a lot of information to make a decision. This guy needs to have a good feeling about it. He'll make that decision with a lot less information. This person, it needs, really enjoys working with their hands. They're very physical. That's important. They need to understand. They need to, use props when they're trying to explain something. Things like that. So that is all kind of wrapped around. I think the big picture is culture. You know, really,
So
really.
that brings us back to the point you made earlier, culture versus strategy, right? So tell us about the results that your culture has created and how that trumps strategy.
Um, so that unfortunately, it's hard to quantify in, like, for example, dollars. I will tell you, we've grown every year for the past 10 years. Now, some years not well. Well, I shouldn't say it. 2023 was really bad for our whole industry. It was kind of the COVID bubble had burst. Again, as you pointed out in the very beginning, we served the pharmaceutical industry. 2020, 21, 22 were crazy because they were just buying so much stuff because of supply chain issues and all this other stuff. And it just inflated the market. We still, fortunately, managed to take only a slight hit in 2023 revenue, where some people were down 40% from 2022 to 2023 in our industry. We were down a few points, basically. My point is this: we've managed to grow every year, both top line and bottom line. And I only can attribute that to, and mind you, we always have challenges, some serious challenges, where a manufacturer will stop selling to us. A big part of our business is working with manufacturers of products and taking their products to market. They make a change in how they want to go to market. They want to go direct, or they want to get another distributor partner, or what have you. That's mainly going direct has been the biggest challenge we've suffered through, like, three times now in the past 10 years. Significant amount of business, and we've managed to pull through. We've managed to make the corrections, make the adjustments, and still grow. So again, I can only attribute that to culture. And really having a team that works well together.
So working well together and culture and pivoting and adjusting to market conditions. tell us how culture has been pivotal in people working together and that culture piece and how that's like maybe a specific example potentially about how that is manifested itself. Like how did that help? How did culture help in that situation?
Well, I would say culture is probably the glue or the ribbon that keeps it all together at the end of the day, and the fact that that everybody has a common baseline, these 31 fundamentals of how we work. Um, I think, just like I said, it just is that kind of glue that keeps it all together. When things start spinning out of control, we really fall back on the strength of the team and how we know each other, how we know our strengths and our challenges, and how we play best to all those. You know, play against the challenges and amplify the strengths.
So it really creates like a team. And I don't mean to repeat what you said, but it really brings like in the face of adversity, instead of people splitting apart and everybody freaking out individually, it's really culture is the thing that ribbon you talked about that brings everyone together. And the sum is greater than the parts, right? The whole, right? So now you're able to actually maybe brainstorm and work together to find that answer when put it together with 31 different people and they're all their brain think, right, versus just everybody in their own corner trying to freak out but not freak out on their own. I think that's a
Right.
huge difference. I mean that's a huge accelerator in its own and by itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, it's seen us through a lot of challenges. Even early, we had one of our neighboring tenant spaces, a few doors down, had a fire this summer that really knocked the whole building out. Thankfully, we weren't affected directly by heat, but the smoke came and got everything dirty, and it caused a lot of problems. That really could have been a huge problem. We were able to again pull together. We cleaned. Now we had services come in too. We didn't clean ourselves, but we had to move everything around and make way for them to clean. It was just a really big upset that literally happened on a Friday night. So Monday morning, well, we didn't have power for like 5 days. But once power was restored, we all came in here and just worked together to do what we had to do to get back up and operational. Um, and again, if people didn't understand the importance of that, again, we're very deliberate about why it's important. What we do is so important for our customers. Um, and understand that the guy next to him or the person next to him was working for the same exact goal that they are, and they're totally aligned. I think that would have taken weeks and weeks to really get back on board. I mean, we had guys working overtime. We had people Saturday and Sunday, whatever it took. Nobody questioned. We just got to get back up working. We got to get this place back up operational. So and then like I said, losing product lines and things. And then the other thing I will tell you, I'm a big believer in the harder you work, the luckier you are. In some cases, we had some very fortunate decisions that went our way. Certain business lines or service offerings that we've gotten into over the years have really paid off.
So I think when you take all of that culture stuff, and if I were to net it down, it would comes down to ownership for me, a sense of ownership, a sense of belonging. Like the people came together and your employees came together and just worked on this for weeks to get it all cleaned up and overtime and everything to get it done, strictly out of ownership, belonging.
Yeah.
Like they cared. Out of that ownership comes a sense of care and respect for the place and all those other pieces that words that go along with that, right? I think that's huge. So tell us what the impact that's internally. Tell us about how that culture impacts now your relationships with your customers and the stickiness and all of that the benefits you see with your customers and your clients.
Well, the best way to explain that is really how we don't. Once we get a customer starts working with us, it just is really sticky. In some rare cases, they start to buy our product. We have the exclusive sales arrangement with the manufacturer. They kind of have to buy it from us, but we don't ever want to be in that situation where it's like that. Typically, what we'll do is we'll have one product line we'll sell to a customer, and then we'll build off of that with our other products and other technologies. Um, but to answer your point directly, it shines through. We do a lot of surveying of our customers, not only for ISO but for our own internal purposes and understanding, and we get really rave reviews from people about the way we care. Getting back to what you said about ownership, I hadn't really thought of it in that way, Abizer, but that is really what happens here. These people are owners of this company. They know it, and they know how important their job is to our success and the team's success. So it really does shine through.
Excellent. Is there anything else you want to add to this conversation? Anything we haven't talked about as far as culture or anything else? Any gotchas, any wins, any be aware of this?
Well, the one thing I would say when it comes down to culture, it is work. It is not an easy thing, and it's like a lot of the things that we know pay off over time. It's a disciplined approach. You have to be dedicated to really being deliberate about your culture, and really making it a centerpiece of the work environment. Because I think once you get over that hump, and that took a couple of years, I would say, realistically, where it just became that they understand this is what we do. And like I said, we hire with it, we coach with it, things like that. But it takes time. Like all these good sort of programs and whatnot, it just takes some time to develop and some discipline to stick to it, and and do the work, and the payoff is ultimately there.
Excellent. So, I think that's a that sums it up pretty well. Take us home. Is there any last thoughts you want to share? Or was that it? Was there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's probably it. As you can see, I attribute it. Again, we could talk about numbers and all this other stuff, but I think the secret sauce and that differentiator is ultimately culture. I shouldn't be saying this. I don't want all my competitors to figure this out. But no, honestly, I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's great. We talk, like, going back to where we started. If I can get anybody to focus more on their culture and doing this stuff, then I'm leaving. It's the bigger game, right? I'm leaving this. I'm leaving something behind that hopefully other people can use, because really it does benefit every single employee. That's the thing. It's not just benefiting the company and our customers. It's benefiting all of them. To understand that they belong here and they fit and how they fit and all this other stuff. So I think it's a thing that all of us should really focus on.
What a great way to leave it. How can people reach out to you, Paul, if they want to connect with you or learn more?
So our website is sentinelprocess.com. We have several companies, but you can find all the information at sentinelprocess.com. And one of the main tabs is the SPS Way, which talks about our fundamentals and our core values and how they interact with each other. I would suggest somebody looks at that. I'm on LinkedIn. So you can find me LinkedIn or online. And these days you can find me all kinds of different ways, I think. On the dark web, hopefully not on the dark web.
Paul, it's always a pleasure. I always admire your logical thinking and your approach to life and how you do things. And I think when you started this podcast from leaving people better than you found them, that is so you. It is so just authentically Paul. So want to acknowledge you for that. Thanks for your time today. Left us a lot to think about as far as our own companies, our own culture, and what we choose to do with it. So appreciate all of that. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. And you're awesome, Abizer. I think I love talking to you. You're so insightful, and you do have a way of getting you going in deep. So it's great. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Take care, my friend.
Thanks for listening to The Bigger Game. If you're ready to lead with intention and create the life you want, follow along at AbuserRashid.com and on social media at AbuserRashid Group. Until next time, keep playing bigger.